So, hi everyone. Welcome to the GMAT Club's essay event. So, it's my pleasure to introduce Susan to you. She is the founder at SIA Admissions, and she'll be guiding us in this event about the HBS, the essays, and she'll tell us how to craft a very compelling HBS essay with her practical yet powerful tips. And whenever you have a question, you can put them in a Q&A box, which will be answered at the end of the presentation. You can also upvote any of the questions which you think you relate to the most. Now I'll leave the floor to Susan to take it ahead. Thank you, Susan, for being here.
Thank you, Shail. Hi, everyone. I see people keep jumping in. So welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you today. I am on the clock in the context of GMAT Club has told me I only have 45 minutes and I have a lot to cover. So I want to dive right in to the presentation and the walkthrough. And for those of you who join later in the process and missed the opening, there's going to be a replay of this session, so you can come in and rewatch the beginning that you've missed. So today's session is designed to do something that you can't ChatGPT. Give you a front row seat of how successful HBS applicants actually think about these essays and why their work resonates with the admission committee. We'll walk through real examples from 3 different industries. So luxury goods, AI/tech, and biotech. The content is all anonymized. Yeah, I can't say that word. but we actually are going to be taking the material from actual applicants that have been admitted into the program. The goal here is not for you to copy these essays. They have been written, HBS has seen them, so they pose no value to you in the context of what is being said, how it's being communicated. So in fact, rather instead, we're going to decode the decision-making of how they frame their story for the HBS specific question and the narrative nuance that made these essays work. So by the end, you'll know what exactly makes for a compelling and a standout HBS essay and why that's something very few applicants can execute on their own, given that it's quite a challenging process to go through. But of course, as we know, when you look at the end product, when you read a final copy of a book, it all sounds so fluid and natural, and it's obvious. But there are so many iterations that come before the final product. So keep always that in mind as you go through these. So essay as of last year, HBS rather, as of last year, no longer has the one open-ended essay question where you can hide behind kind of this general life story. Instead, HBS is putting you under a microscope in 3 targeted prompts. Each one isolates a specific dimension: strategic thinking, leadership approach, and growth mindset. That's what they want to see. The challenge is that these 3 essays must stand alone in excellence in their own right, but also work together to form a cohesive and coherent, unified narrative across your entire application. So today, what I'm going to show you is what that looks like when done at the highest level, and we're going to bring in 3 prompts, 3 separate stories or excerpts rather from each of those prompts. So in the mindset prompt, or business-minded prompt, HBS is testing your ability to see the levers that matter to make the case, to make a case for action and to deliver impact that moves the needle. So the difference between a good and a great response is that the great response reads like a strategic case study in miniature. So it's not like your entire life story in there. So I'm going to just quickly read the prompt. So this is an example from a luxury consumer goods candidate. So it reads, given global HQ's focus on novelties, local audiences never learned the heritage story behind a century-old design. I propose adding a short historical context in parallel to HQ's copy to bridge the cultural gap. By tailoring language with our local team, we drove higher search rankings and consumer praise. Notice how this isn't about a simple execution of a marketing campaign. It's about diagnosing a blind spot, a mismatch between global messaging that the HQ held and the local market resonance, and creating a solution that worked for both. Two things that make this essay, this angle, this framing work is that the applicant doesn't position themselves as fighting HQ. They frame it as aligning HQ's goals with the local needs. And two, they close with measurable market impact, which converts a creative idea into a business result. I've shortened this. There is an actual measurable result in this actual essay, but the point here is to be able to convey this in an essay. Now, if you look at the tech angle, the excerpt is, I was asked to develop a model to identify vehicles to explore applying machine learning and LiDAR. I explored beyond the scope that I was given, integrating tracking capabilities and enable future application in LiDAR and optical detection. What began as a proof of concept became the company's first enterprise-wide AI adoption. This is a perfect example of narrative escalation. The scope starts small, building a model, but by pursuing curiosity and adding value beyond the brief, beyond the initial scope, the project turns into an enterprise-wide shift. HBS loves this arc because it shows both initiative and vision, and you don't just do a job, that you redefine what's possible with your creativity that you bring to the solutions that you are working on. And then the third one, the biotech candidate, in preparing our first FDA submission, I coordinated experts across clinical, microbial, and drug design functions to position our lead therapy as both safe and effective. The positive FDA response became a key driver in securing investment and grant. There's a nuance here that, when you read this, it sounds very simple. But this one succeeds because it's not just a regulatory success story. It's about a commercial one. So the applicants framed the FDA win as a business enabler, showing they understand that biotech, the science in that space, only matters if we can translate it into market momentum. And that's a very different mindset than showing that we've passed regulatory review. That is very, very different nuance to the story and tells a different mindset from the admission team's perspective. So across luxury, AI, and biotech, you saw the same underlying pattern. Step one, spot the gap. Not a vague problem, but something specific and consequential. Step two, frame it so others buy in, whether that's HQ in Paris for the luxury candidate, the CTO, or the FDA. Step three, you deliver results that the market or the organization or the customers can feel. If you are looking at your HBS essay one, and you can't clearly identify these levers or these layers in your draft, it's definitely a signal that your narrative is focused on events and not really showing your strategic thinking. And that's exactly where strong coaching can come in and differentiate and help you differentiate between a good essay and a irresistible one. So keep this in mind when you're working through and evaluating your own essays. Think of these three elements, 3 steps, if your essay conveys that effectively, and be brutally honest with yourself. Don't look to find them. Look to see, are they evident and clearly there without needing to excavate, essentially, your essay. So prompt number 2, leadership focus. This prompt is where many applicants go wrong. They think leadership is about being the hero. At HBS, leadership is about creating more leaders. It's about designing systems, processes, and opportunities so that others can contribute at their best. It's not only you being the hero solving all the problems. So let's go through samples of this or excerpts of this. I kept the order consistent throughout. So the first one is going to be the luxury goods applicant. So faced with a team unfamiliar with university outreach, I connected them with colleagues who already had those networks. Within days, they had access to key contacts that would have taken months to build. This is a small but potent example. The applicant doesn't take over the task, doesn't say, here, I'm going to take over and I'm going to help you and I'm going to do it for you. They enable the team to own it. And in doing so, accelerate timelines and building new capabilities. HBS looks for leaders who can create sustainable solutions, not just quick wins by them jumping in to solve the problems. So this is something that you have to be looking at in your leadership essay if that's the angle that you have chosen to pursue. In the second excerpt, we have, without a formal title, I proposed a split between engineers focused on production systems and those on startup projects. This clarified roles, resolved a $10 million initiative breakdown, and restored momentum in the project. This is a leadership example through systems design. The applicant diagnosed an organizational bottleneck, proposed a structure, and got buy-in at the top to execute on it. This is not about charisma, it's about really building a solution that enables execution for everyone involved, even though they didn't have the title of the leader in this situation. In the biotech example, the prompt or the excerpt is, I established weekly reporting meetings and dashboards to connect our scientists' data to business milestones. The shift sped decision-making, improved turnaround time, and refocused the team on our mission. So when we think of business and science, we think of them in silos. What this candidate has done is shown how they have merged the two so that they both speak together. And this is leadership in translation, taking a team from with deep expertise and connecting their work to strategic objective. And it's definitely the kind of bridge that HBS particularly, or even just showcases leadership when you are creating cross-functional or working in cross-functional environments, that the work and the mission forward is highly dependent on that collaboration. So what is important for you to remember? What I want you to notice from the 3 samples or 3 excerpts is that none of them were about person coming in and heroically fixing everything themselves. Instead, they focused on creating conditions where the team could thrive. And that's the shift most applicants miss. Influence, first component is influence without authority. So you have to demonstrate that you can influence without having the official authority. Each applicant drove change without relying on a formal title. The second thing is you want to show that you have capacity multiplication. They didn't solve the problem for the team. They created an environment that enabled everyone to contribute their own efforts into that collective vision. And the third, it's a sustainable solution. Their changes stuck, whether it was new process, a better structure, or a lasting cultural shift. When you write your leadership essay, your instinct may be centered on your own achievement, on you being the hero. Here's how I showed up and saved the day. Resist that. The most compelling leadership narratives at HBS show that you can create systems, cultures, and capabilities that keep producing results long after you are gone. And that's what HBS is actually looking for in essays. And if you're struggling to reframe your leadership stories in this way, that's exactly where SIA can come in, and we can help you frame your narrative and build a strategic architecture that captures all of your application as a whole. I see a raised hand. We're going to come into answering questions at the end. Excellent. So prompt number 3, HBS wants people who will lean into the unfamiliar and accelerate their learning curve, because that's exactly what the case method demands. There is a reason why they have these prompts and they have their application process the way it is. They want to know that you can succeed in this case method teaching methodology that Harvard is known for. And the strongest essay show you actively seeking out stretch experiences so that you can communicate that you are the kind of candidate that belongs at HBS. So let's go through the samples or excerpts in the same order again. So when sourcing pink sapphire proved unavailable, I pivoted to pink spinel. I think I'm pronouncing it right. I don't know how you pronounce that gem. Maintaining cultural symbolism while cutting production risk. The launch exceeded sales target by 70% and won customer acclaim. This excerpt, this example works because it shows adaptability under constraints. The applicant solved for both the business feasibility problem that they were facing and also cultural resonance. They don't frame the constraint as a problem. They really framed it as a creative challenge that they were lucky to work on and be able to have such amazing results with. If we look at the tech example, I volunteered for a UI task outside my expertise, using it to earn trust and access to the project AI model development. The leap led to my appointment as engineering lead for the flagship launch. This is a calculated risk-taking example. They essentially chose to do the unglamorous work to get a foot in the door, then delivered at the highest level once inside, which led them to successfully being appointed in this, lead engineering role. It's a perfect illustration of curiosity leading to career inflection. That's what HBS is looking for. And in the biotech example, this person came in with no they were, I believe, an econ background. So they had no engineering background. So they say, with no formal engineering background, I absorbed our COO's technical knowledge before his departure. This enabled me to rework a regulatory proposal, saving 10% of our budget and reallocating funds to critical studies in their biotech project that they were working on. Here, growth is tied directly to value creation. It's not learning for learning's sake. It's strategic acquisition of new skills to protect and advance a company's mission, and the mission that they, knowing their story, they held deeply. They were deeply connected to. So the takeaway, what to remember in your own essay, because of course, none of these are going to be relevant to you specifically because you have your own story. And I don't want you to think that, oh, here's the blueprint and I'm going to write it exactly like this and I'm going to get in. That does not work, right? But when you evaluate your own essays, I want you to keep a few things in mind. So growth is one of those buzzwords people throw around in applications without showing what it actually looks like in practice. For HBS, it's not enough to say, I've learned a lot, or I grew from experience, or I had these challenges. They want proof that you actively sought out challenges, expanded your capabilities, and produced outcomes that matter to the organizations or the community you were part of. For all three examples, you saw that there were three components that they illustrated. Proactive curiosity. They sought out hard problems, from sourcing alternative gems under pressure to volunteering for unglamorous work to and all of these opened new doors for them. Skill expansion. So growth only comes with skill expansion, something that you are not familiar with. And each had to learn something new, whether it was product sourcing, UI design, or manufacturing regulations. And the third is tangible payoffs. Their growth wasn't just personal. They learned new skills, of course, but it produced measurable wins for the communities that they were serving, exceeding sales targets, securing flagship launches, or saving critical budgets. If your growth story doesn't connect your development to meaningful outcomes in the community in which that story is a part of, it won't resonate with HBS. And this is not just about, I learned how to code. That is great, but how did you apply it is really the question. They want to admit people who grew in ways that translated both for themselves as individuals, but also for the organizations that they serve. As we come to a close, because I want to leave room for questions, and bring in your own stories as you are developing your essay, especially if you're targeting round one, and ask your own specific questions. But two more slides. How do we put this all together? When you step back, these aren't three disconnected essays. They're three angles on the same person. And I absolutely want you to take that away. When you look at and you work on each essay separately, which is normal to do, you're not going to work at all three of them at the same time, of course. When you finish them, or when you're halfway through, look at the collective stories with the collective other parts of your application. Are you bringing dimensionality to your personality, to who you are? So business-minded has to show how you think, your ability to identify high impact opportunities, frame them in context, and execute with measurable results. Leadership-focused essay shows how you operate with and through others, not just to hit targets, but to build systems and to build people who keep delivering even after you leave an organization. And the growth-oriented shows how you evolve. This is seeking out uncomfortable opportunities, add new capabilities, or translate that growth in, translate those opportunities into areas where you can get out of your comfort zone to create wins for not just yourself as you grow as a professional, but also for the organizations that you are part of. When these three prompts work together, the admission reader walks away thinking, this person is strategic, influential, and adaptive. All of the things that HBS is looking for in the context of the candidates that they say yes to. So your job is to make sure that all three parts reinforce the same trajectory so they don't seem like three different disjointed stories of kind of like three different people, essentially. Now, some pitfalls to keep in mind, because I see this often. Even strong candidates make them. First is resume rehash, especially for SA1. Simply rehashing your career, it's not really going to move the needle, and it doesn't really add any value to your HBS application. The essays aren't about what you have done per se. They're really about how you think and why does it matter. The second problem that I see is same sort of role or tone across the prompts. If you play the same character in all situations, then you are kind of a two-dimensional person. They're looking for people who have an ability to be multi-dimensional, and that has to show in your 3 essays. It is also possible that you can over-edit or edit the life out of your essays. If every sentence sounds like it came from a corporate press release, you lose the authenticity that makes you uniquely you. And you definitely don't want that. The positioning is important in the context of how you're telling your story, but the over polish is not necessary. And definitely, if you recognize yourself in any of these elements, I invite you to reach out to discuss essentially how we can help you position yourself for HBS or any other M7 top 10 business schools. What we work on is diving deeper into pulling out the character nuances of the candidates. And as you know, the application, these 3 questions were released last year for the first time. And we had 3 different stories, 3 different characters, 3 different backgrounds, and we were able to communicate the nuances that they brought to the table that made them uniquely theirs without sounding like a cookie cutter templated essay or application itself. So their QR is on the screen if you want to book a consultation to talk how we can support your application, and or you can go to cadmissions.com and you can book a consultation that way to discuss how we can support you. So I think I'm on time. We have about 17 minutes left, and I love to answer questions for you all. So I will be stopping the screen so I can see the questions. So Shail, how are we going to do this? Are we going to answer questions? Am I answering questions, or are you going to bring them on the screen?
Maybe can you see the chat box, or maybe like you can read it out, or do you want me to?
Sure, I can read it out. Perfect. I'm just going to go in order, so I don't really know how this functions, how this works. So I'll just go in order in which they are. They don't seem to be upvoted, at least not many. So my understanding is that goals need to be ambitious but achievable. As an aspiring entrepreneur who can make sure, how can we make sure that our drive and dedication comes through when we don't have a business yet at the time of application? Well, your goals, I agree, your goals has to be ambitious but achievable. So you've been listening, so that's good. But you don't need to have a business idea to be admitted to HBS. What you need is to know what problem you're looking to solve. Now, if you say, I want to be a business owner to solve world's problems, well, that's not really realistic because you can't. You are only one person. You can dive deeper into the kind of problems that you want to solve, and then find the sector, find the kind of first find the sector itself, right? And then look in the sector, what is the biggest problem? And then go into how you're going to solve that problem. and then find the functional role you're going to have, right? If you are doing entrepreneurship, how do you imagine solving that problem, right? You don't need, again, you don't need a business plan for HBS. There are some schools you do, but not for HBS. You do not need that. But as an entrepreneur, I will say, if you're pitching entrepreneurship, make sure that you have a tendency of exuding entrepreneurial tendencies. If you want to be an entrepreneur and all the work that you have done has been sort of more traditional, it's not going to necessarily scream out, I'm an entrepreneur, and therefore I would ask you to reassess your goals. Okay. Next questions. Was wondering how to position a gender-based investing role given the diversity related cuts going in the US. Also, is it prudent to mention that I'm willing to come back to my base country post MBA given my current visa climate? Gender-based investing role, I would say, yes, this is a topic that is a bit challenging at the moment. But I would, if you are, I've been hearing these, so I've been having obviously a lot of these conversations, and I've been hearing people talk about like investing for women in their or providing capital for women entrepreneurs, that kind of stuff. I think that can make sense as a long-term goal, depending on what your experiences look like. But the short-term goal should be something that gives you more exposure. So it shouldn't be, I'm going to start this investing fund unless you come in with a lot of experience in the investing space. In terms of going back to your home base post-MBA, I think they will see that as hedging and not necessarily the best approach to your application. Things are going to change by the time you graduate, essentially. So I would, if you're choosing to apply to HBS, I would focus on what you want to do post-MBA. If they have questions about that, they will ask you in the interview, but focus on really having a cohesive story across the board. Okay. Can we write about how I got fired and then I got a job in the same organization in a different department? That's a risky approach, but depends on the story. So I don't have enough context to be able to tell you exactly if that's a good story or not. But getting fired is, I would say off the bat, is too risky unless it's some kind of really compelling story. But we don't want drama really in your application as much as possible. Try to avoid it. I won't mention the name, even though you introduce yourself, just because this is going to be available as a replay, and I want to protect your anonymity on here. So you're an investment management professional from Mumbai in India. I'm exploring a pivot into private equity with a strong interest in AI's role in business transformation. Excellent. My question is, from your perspective, how can a candidate from a non-elite academic background effectively convey that they will thrive and contribute meaningfully to HBS highly collaborative, case-driven environment? I would not look at your academic background as elite or not elite. How did you perform? How is your GMAT or GRE? Use those as indicators of your capability to succeed. And then also in your investment management roles maybe that you've had since you graduated, have you had success? Did you grow professionally? Did you have promotions? If so, all of those are indicators that you would be able to succeed. So one of those individuals on that roster that you saw did not come from a, highly reputed institution, and they were able to get in anyways. So again, it's really more about the story. And obviously the evidence of your success that indicates that you have the ability to succeed in a very challenging environment, essentially. Shifting from a risk division to investment banking division through an MBA, is a realistic or achievable goal? It depends on how you position it. I have seen it fail and I have seen it succeed. So it depends on the full macro story in the context of where you are, what are you looking to do, and how all this fits together. Okay. So I'm going through the Q&As. If you wrote a question in the chat, please write it in the Q&A box. So that's why they're all in order. In filling the HBS application, there's a section asking about the use of AI during the application process. Is there a penalty for choosing a yes here? I don't think there's going to be necessarily a penalty, but they're going to definitely scrutinize your writing a little bit more. If you've said yes to that, if you've done it, right? And I think everyone will be scrutinized. I've seen way too many AI generated essays, and it will be evident that if you relied too heavily on it in your application, it will be very evident to see for the admission committee. So it's not necessarily a penalty if you use it as a sort of a light-hearted way of structuring your thoughts, and then really diving deeper into telling your story in your own words. I think I lost. Okay. Do all essays need to be work related? No. There are some in there that were not necessarily work related, but they should be either work or extracurricular recent related. So if you graduated 3+ years ago, you shouldn't be using stories from your college experience. But if you've done extracurricular work since and you are currently actively doing extracurricular work, you can definitely use that in your essays. But majority, so one essay can be extracurricular, majority should be professional. As a deferred applicant, does landing a job prior to submitting your application significantly increases your chance of acceptance? Absolutely. 98% of deferred applicants who are admitted to business schools, Harvard included, have a job lined up before they submit their application. So if you're a deferred applicant, you need that in order to get in. What does HBS or any business school expect from students in very specifically when they ask why an MBA and why this business school? What they want to know your goals, and have you thought about why are you choosing this particular business school? So you need to have your long-term vision, your short-term plan, and what specifically in this program that you need in order to be successful in both your short-term and long-term goals. Harvard gives you very small, tiny little space to communicate this. Other schools give you more space to communicate this, but definitely there is a place for you to communicate all those different pieces in there and make sure that they all tie together. In relation to prompt 1, does this have to necessarily pertain to one's job? Can it be an independent research evaluated, eventually being where one sees themselves after an MBA? If you've done an independent research project in college and you worked for however many years, different from the research, and then you tell HBS that you want to go back to the research that you've done and haven't done anything in between, that is a no-go. Excuse me, admission teams don't really want to see person reverting back to the old things. Rather, they want to see people moving forward. So it really depends on your full narrative. But SA1 is essentially your goal. So it does have to be professional. And you can tie in, even if you end up deciding that the research is focused on, or if your goals are related to your research, you want to tie in how your experiences that you've had that are professional connect to transferable skills later down the line. How can someone frame business-minded essays if one is coming from non-traditional background, like medical in my case? I've worked with a client who was a physical therapist, and we were able to translate how they worked with other people to create systems, create opportunities to help everyone, grow, help the department grow based on the work that they have done. So dig deeper if you're in the medical field. What have you done? How have you supported your colleagues, and demonstrate that there is business mindedness there for sure. Like, I don't believe that there is no business mindedness in anything, even if you think of like art as an artist or a painter. Like, there's business minded everywhere. You just have to look deeper and think more creatively. How to differentiate between business oriented and growth oriented, because proactively choosing a problem also falls into decisions you have to take in to shape your career. Business oriented and growth oriented. Growth oriented is the opportunities that you are going to take that are outside of your scope of work, right? You saw some of the examples in these three excerpts themselves. Whereas business-minded, business-oriented is, how do we elevate what we currently have, right? How do we make it better? So there's a nuanced distinction between the two. I think we have 2 minutes. Let's go and answer a few more questions. Does having experience in PE in emerging markets at a local fund, not global fund, equally valued as PE investor experience in brand name? No, it's not equally valued, of course, because you have to be marketable to future PE companies that you're going to target and apply to. So it's not the same. However, you can demonstrate, if it's local, how much more exposure, how much more experience have you had than a typical analyst would at a large organization that has more bureaucracy in place and all of those components. So your job is to dive deeper into what makes your experience unique that others can value, even though it's not a branded organization. Okay, last question. I might have a profile with a deal breaker for M7 schools, no big corporate experience, low GPA, GMAT 665. My main concern is that whether M7 schools are reasonable goals for me. I'd love to hear your view. Low GPA, low GMAT, lower than the average. I would say you need to increase the GMAT or go for the GRE. And depending on, big corporate names are not necessary, but you do need to have growth, professional growth, and impact that you can be able to make in order to demonstrate that M7s are feasible for you. But your GMAT definitely needs to be improved if you're targeting M7s. All right. I think we are at the end, Shail, right?
Yeah, exactly, Susan. So you'll have to wrap up now.
Excellent. Well, I just wanted to, I know there are some questions that are left unanswered. If you go to siaadmissions.com, there is a profile evaluation. If you want your profile to be evaluated, you can submit it. I will review it, give you commentary. If you can indicate in there, you have a space to put in your notes. And you can indicate in there what schools you're applying to, and I can give you more comments on your specific case that you can take with you. And then if you want to work with us, of course, reach out for a consultation.
Thank you so much, everyone. And please reach out to Sia as soon as possible. R1 is just around the corner, and I think she is just overworked and after a point will not be able to afford more clients for R1. So hurry up, guys. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
thank
everyone.
you. Bye bye.
Yeah.